The siren screamed through Maple Grove as Karen's smug smile faltered. She'd called 911 on her neighbor for draining his pool, certain she'd finally gotten him arrested. But when Agent Marcus Stone flashed his federal badge and the responding officers stepped back in stunned recognition, her world crumbled. What she thought was neighborhood justice was about to become her worst nightmare. Because the man she'd been harassing for months wasn't just any homeowner, he was conducting a classified federal BHL. The morning sun cast long shadows across Maple Grove's pristine lawns as Marcus Stone guided the industrial pump's thick hose deeper into his backyard swimming pool. The machine's steady thrum echoed off the surrounding houses, a mechanical heartbeat that had been pulsing for the past 3 hours. Crystal clear water rushed through the hose in a torrent, snaking across his yard and disappearing into the storm drain at the street's edge. Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead and checked his watch. 7:23 a.m. Right on schedule. The pump would need another 2 hours to completely drain the 20,000-gallon pool, but timing was everything in his line of work. What his neighbors didn't know, what they could never know, was that this wasn't home maintenance. This was a federal operation 6 months in the making. Excuse me. The shrill voice cut through the pump's steady drone like fingernails on glass. Marcus didn't need to turn around to know who was marching across his perfectly manicured lawn. Karen Hendricks, his next-door neighbor, had made his life a living hell since he'd moved to Maple Grove 8 months ago. Her complaints had started small. His grass was too long, his garbage cans were positioned 3 inches beyond the approved setback, his outdoor lights were allegedly shining into her bedroom window, but they'd escalated with each passing week, becoming more frequent, more aggressive, more personal. Are you completely insane? Karen planted herself directly in his line of sight, her hands on her hips and her face flushed with righteous indignation. She was dressed in her usual armor of suburban superiority, pressed khakis, a polo shirt with the collar popped just so, and tennis shoes so white they practically glowed. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe ponytail that seemed to stretch her features taut with perpetual disapproval. Marcus slowly straightened, keeping his expression neutral. At 38 he'd learned to mask his emotions behind a wall of professional calm that had served him well during 15 years with the Bureau. His neighbors saw a quiet computer consultant who worked from home and kept to himself. They had no idea that Special Agent Marcus Stone had been embedded in their picture-perfect subdivision to investigate a human trafficking ring that had been using suburban pools as temporary holding facilities for their victims. "Good morning, Karen," he said evenly. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" "Don't you dare try to deflect," she snapped, gesturing wildly at the rushing water. "Do you have any idea what you're doing to the neighborhood? 2 property values. You're flooding the street." Marcus glanced at the storm drain, which was handling the water flow without any issues. The city's drainage system had been designed for much heavier loads during spring storms. The water's going exactly where it's supposed to go, into the municipal drainage system. That's not the point. Karen's voice climbed another octave. You can't just drain an entire swimming pool onto public property without permits, without notification, without asking your permission, Marcus interrupted quietly. The question hung in the air between them like a challenge. Karen's mouth opened and closed several times before she found her voice again. "I am the president of the Maple Grove Homeowners Association," she said, as if the title carried the weight of federal law. "Every major modification to property in this subdivision requires board approval. That includes pool maintenance that affects common areas." Marcus had read the HOA bylaws when he'd purchased the house through the Bureau's shell company. Karen was technically correct about major modifications, but pool draining fell under routine maintenance, a fact she either didn't know or chose to ignore. "This is routine maintenance, Karen, no different from having the pool cleaned or the filter replaced. Routine maintenance doesn't require industrial equipment." She pointed accusingly at the pump. "That thing is loud enough to wake the dead, and it's been running since dawn, since 6 a.m. Actually, well within the neighborhood noise ordinance guidelines." Karen's eyes narrowed. She'd been looking for ammunition to use against him, and Marcus could see her mentally cataloging every detail. The expensive pump equipment, the precision with which he was draining the pool, the fact that he seemed to know exactly what he was doing despite never having performed this kind of maintenance before. "Why are you really draining it?" she asked, her tone shifting from outrage to suspicion. "The pool company was just here. Last month, I saw their truck." Marcus felt a familiar tightening in his chest. Karen's nosiness had been a constant problem throughout his assignment. She watched everything from her kitchen window, noting the arrival and departure of every vehicle, every visitor, every delivery. She'd already questioned him about the computer equipment deliveries that were actually sophisticated surveillance gear. She'd made pointed comments about his odd hours when he'd been conducting late-night reconnaissance, and now she was asking about the pool maintenance. That wasn't really pool maintenance at all. The truth was that the pool company's monthly visit had been a cover for the installation of specialized recording equipment. Microscopic cameras and audio devices had been embedded in the pool's tilework, positioned to capture any activity in the backyard of the house directly behind the house, where Viktor Kozlov supposedly ran a legitimate import-export business, but actually coordinated a network that moved human cargo through a dozen suburban locations across 3 states. The equipment had worked perfectly for 5 months, providing crucial intelligence about Kozlov's operation. But last week, one of Kozlov's associates had become suspicious of unusual reflections in the pool tiles. The man had performed a systematic search of the area, and while he hadn't found the devices, his paranoia had been enough to convince Kozlov to change locations. The operation was blown, and Marcus had been ordered to remove all surveillance equipment before the house was abandoned. Completely. "I'm having some tile work done," Marcus said. "Easier to do it with the pool empty." Tile work. Karen's voice dripped with skepticism. "On a pool that's less than 3 years old. Previous owner used cheap materials. The grout is failing." It was a plausible explanation, but Marcus could see that Karen wasn't buying it. She circled the pool's edge like a predator, examining the pristine tile work that showed no signs of deterioration. Her investigation was interrupted by the arrival of another neighbor. "Morning, folks." Bob Martinez waved from the shared fence line. Bob was everything Karen wasn't: friendly, easygoing, and genuinely interested in building community rather than controlling it. He was also a retired police sergeant, which made him both an ally and a potential complication for Mark. "Cover L." "Bob, thank God you're here," Karen called out. "Maybe you can talk some sense into our neighbor." Bob ambled over, coffee mug in hand, and surveyed the scene. "Doing some pool work, Marcus?" "Just routine maintenance," Marcus replied, grateful for Bob's reasonable tone. "Routine maintenance, my foot," Karen interjected. "He's been pumping water into the street for hours without any permits, without any notification, without any consideration for the rest of us who have to live here." Bob chuckled. "Karen, the man's taking care of his property. What's the harm in that?" "The harm is that he's destroying our property values with his constant projects and modifications. First it was the security system that looks like something out of a military installation. Then it was the landscaping changes that violated the architectural guidelines. Now this." Marcus tensed. The security system Karen was referring to was a state-of-the-art surveillance network that allowed him to monitor Kozlov's property and surrounding areas. The landscaping changes had been necessary to create sightlines and concealment for his equipment. Every modification had been carefully planned to support his mission, while maintaining the appearance of normal homeowner behavior. "What security system?" Bob asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "You haven't noticed?" Karen gestured toward Marcus's house. "Cameras on every corner, motion sensors, lighting that turns on if a squirrel so much as crosses his yard. It's like living next to a prison." Bob squinted at the house, taking inventory of the visible security features. As a former cop, he'd know the difference between standard home security and something more sophisticated. Marcus held his breath, waiting for Bob's assessment. "Looks like pretty standard stuff to me," Bob said finally. "Maybe a little more comprehensive than most, but nothing unusual for someone who works from home and travels for business." Karen's face flushed with frustration. "You're not looking closely enough. The equipment is military. The installation was done by professionals, not some local security company. And have you noticed that he never actually seems to travel for business? His car is always here, but he claims to be out of town." The observation was uncomfortably accurate. The murmur of conversation died the moment Marcus stepped through Karen's front door. 12 pairs of eyes turned toward him with expressions ranging from surprise to outright hostility. Karen stood frozen in her living room, a thick manila folder clutched against her chest like armor, her mouth hanging open in shock. "Well," Marcus said quietly, surveying the assembled neighbors, "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." Karen recovered first, her face flushing with indignation. "You weren't invited. This is a private HOA board meeting." "Actually," Bob Martinez interjected from his position near the fireplace, "HOA meetings are supposed to be open to all residents. It's in the bylaws." Marcus nodded his thanks to Bob and stepped fully into the room. The living space had been arranged like a courtroom, with folding chairs arranged in rows, facing a makeshift presentation area where Karen had set up a laptop connected to a large screen TV. The screen displayed a satellite image of their neighborhood with Marcus's house, circled in red. "Please, don't let me stop you," Marcus said, taking a seat in the back row. "I'm curious to hear what's so urgent that it required an emergency meeting." Karen's eyes darted between Marcus and her audience, clearly thrown off by his unexpected presence. She'd planned this presentation carefully, building her case against him in his absence. Having him actually attend changed the entire dynamic. This meeting was called to address ongoing violations of neighborhood standards and community safety concerns, she said, her voice tight with barely controlled anxiety. "Community safety?" asked Janet Walsh, an elderly widow who lived 3 houses down. "What kind of safety concerns?" Karen opened her manila folder and pulled out a stack of photographs. I've been documenting suspicious activities for the past 8 months. Activities that suggest our neighbor here is not who he claims to be. She clicked a remote, and the satellite image was replaced by a photograph of Marcus's house taken from her kitchen window. Red arrows pointed to various security cameras and motion sensors mounted around the property. This is a home security system that was installed by professionals overnight, Karen announced. Not a local company, but specialists who arrived in unmarked vehicles and worked through the night. The equipment itself is military grade, far beyond anything a computer consultant would need or could afford. Several neighbors leaned forward, studying the image with new interest. Marcus remained perfectly still, his expression neutral. Karen clicked to the next slider chart showing vehicle movements. Here's a record of every car that's visited his property over the past 6 months. Notice anything unusual? Bob squinted. At the screen, there's not many visitors for someone who supposedly runs a consulting business. Exactly, Karen said triumphantly. But look at the timing of these visits. Always late at night or very early morning. Always brief, never more than 30 minutes. And look at this. She clicked again, revealing close-up photographs of license plates. Every single vehicle is a rental car or has government plates. The room fell silent as neighbors absorbed this information. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. Karen's documentation was far more comprehensive than he'd realized. She'd been conducting surveillance with the thoroughness of a professional investigator. Furthermore, Karen continued, warming to her subject, his claimed travel schedule doesn't match his actual presence. He tells neighbors he travels frequently for business, but his car never leaves for extended periods. However, I've documented him leaving at odd hours in different vehicles, always rentals and returning the same day. She clicked through several more slides showing Marcus entering and exiting various rental cars, the timestamps clearly visible. The photographs had been taken from her kitchen window with a telephoto lens, capturing details that would have been invisible to casual observation. This suggests either that he's lying about his business travel, or that he's engaged in activities that require him to conceal his movements and maintain false schedules. Karen, Bob said slowly, this is pretty extensive surveillance you've been conducting on your neighbor. I'm protecting our community, she shot back. Someone has to ask the hard questions when a stranger moves into our neighborhood and immediately begins exhibiting suspicious behavior. Marcus found himself impressed, despite his growing concern. Karen had built a solid case based on careful observation and logical deduction. Her conclusions were accurate, even if she didn't understand their true significance. Let's move on to today's incident, Karen said, clicking to a photograph of the pool draining operation. He claimed this was routine maintenance, but the equipment used was industrial grade and clearly expensive. The operation was conducted with military precision and timing. She clicked through a series of photos showing the pool draining process, the sophisticated pump equipment, and Marcus's methodical approach to the task. More importantly, when I questioned him about it, he had ready explanations for everything. Not the stumbling responses of someone caught off guard, but practiced answers delivered smoothly and confidently. The responses of someone who had prepared for interrogation. The word interrogation hung in the air like a threat. Marcus could see Bob's expression growing more serious as he processed Karen's evidence. The retired sergeant's cop instincts were clearly engaged now. What exactly are you suggesting? Asked Tom Peterson, the HOA treasurer. Karen took a deep breath, clearly preparing for her big revelation. I believe our neighbor is either engaged in criminal activity or is some kind of undercover law enforcement officer conducting an unauthorized surveillance operation in our neighborhood. The room erupted in startled murmurs. Several neighbors turned to stare at Marcus, who remained motionless in his chair. That's a pretty serious accusation, Bob said carefully. It's the only explanation that fits all the evidence, Karen replied. The sophisticated security system, the irregular schedule, the government vehicles, the professional-grade equipment, the prepared responses to questions, the fact that he moved here 8 months ago and immediately began behaving like someone conducting surveillance. She clicked to her final slide, a detailed timeline of Marcus's activities with annotations highlighting suspicious patterns. He's been watching something or someone in this neighborhood, and we have a right to know what it is. Marcus realized that Karen had come dangerously close to uncovering the truth through pure deduction. Her analysis was flawed in some details, but accurate in its broader conclusions. She'd correctly identified him as an undercover operative, even if she didn't understand the nature of his mission. So what do you want us to do about it? Asked Janet Walsh. I want him to answer some direct questions, Karen said, turning to face Marcus. Right here, in front of everyone. No more evasive responses or prepared explanations. The truth. The room fell silent as all eyes focused on Marcus. He could feel the weight of their expectations, their suspicions, their desire for answers. 2 questions that had been building for months. This was the moment of reckoning that Karen had been orchestrating a public confrontation, where he would be forced to either maintain his cover or reveal his true identity. Marcus stood slowly, feeling the familiar weight of his weapon beneath his jacket. Every instinct told him to maintain his cover, to deflect and evade until he could arrange extraction. But looking at Karen's triumphant expression, at the neighbors, who had gathered to judge him based on her evidence, he made a different choice. "You want the truth?" he said quietly. "Yes," Karen replied, lifting her chin defiantly. "I want to know exactly who you are and what you've been doing in our neighborhood." Marcus reached into his jacket pocket, his movement causing several neighbors to tense instinctively. But instead of a weapon, he withdrew a leather credential case and flipped it open, revealing the distinctive badge and identification of a federal agent. "Special Agent Marcus Stone, Federal Bureau of Investigation." The words hit the room like a physical force. Karen's manila folder slipped from her hands, scattering photographs across the carpet. Bob Martinez straightened instinctively, his military bearing returning. The other neighbors sat in stunned silence, processing the revelation. "For the past 8 months, Marcus continued, his voice carrying the authority of his true position, I've been conducting an undercover investigation into a human trafficking network operating in this area. My presence here has been authorized at the highest levels of federal law enforcement." Karen's face had gone pale, but her voice remained defiant. "Prove it. Anyone can buy a fake badge." Marcus pulled out his encrypted phone and dialed a number. "This is Agent Stone, badge number 2847. I need immediate verification of my identity and assignment status." He handed the phone to Bob. "Riverside County Sheriff's Department dispatch. They'll confirm my credentials with the Bureau." Bob took the phone, his expression grave. The room listened in tense silence as he spoke with the dispatcher, providing Marcus's badge number and requesting verification. After several minutes of back and forth, Bob handed the phone back to Marcus. "He's legitimate," Bob announced. "Federal agent on active assignment." The confirmation hit Karen like a physical blow. She stumbled backward, groping for a chair to support herself. But the pool. The environmental violations. There were no environmental violations. 3 days after the revelation, at the HOA meeting, Karen Hendricks sat in her kitchen at 5:47 a.m., nursing her third cup of coffee and staring through her telephoto lens at the abandoned house behind Marcus's property. The same window that had once served as her command post for spying on her mysterious neighbor now provided surveillance of a different kind of target entirely. The house at 1247 Elm Street had been empty for 6 days, ever since Victor Kozlov's trafficking operation had relocated after detecting signs of surveillance. But Marcus had explained that abandoned safe houses were often revisited for cleanup operations, evidence removal, or equipment retrieval. Someone would come back eventually, and when they did, Karen would be watching. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Anything unusual overnight?" "Negative, but garbage truck missed the house again yesterday. 3rd week in a row," she typed back. "Good catch. Real residents would have called the city by now." Karen felt a small surge of pride at the praise. After months of having her observations dismissed as paranoid nosiness, it was validating to have her attention to detail recognized as valuable. She'd thrown herself into the civilian consultant role with the same obsessive dedication she'd once applied to investigating Marcus, but now her surveillance skills were serving a purpose that actually mattered. The irony wasn't lost on her. For 8 months, she'd been convinced that Marcus was the threat to their neighborhood's safety. In reality, the genuine danger had been hiding in plain sight just beyond her back fence. While she'd been focused on documenting the activities of the one person actually working to stop it, movement caught her eye through the telephoto lens. A white panel van was turning onto Elm Street, moving slowly as if the driver was checking addresses. Karen quickly focused her camera and began taking photos, noting the time, license plate, and direction of approach. The van pulled into the driveway of 1247 Elm Street. Karen's heart rate spiked as she grabbed her phone and speed-dialed Marcus's number. "They're back," she whispered. "White panel van. California plates 8G4J752. 2 occupants, both male. Stay on the line." Marcus replied, his voice instantly alert. "Keep documenting everything, but stay back from the windows. These people are dangerous." Through her lens, Karen watched 2 men emerge from the van. Both were wearing work clothes and carrying what appeared to be cleaning supplies, but their movements were too cautious, too alert for ordinary maintenance workers. They spent several minutes scanning the surrounding area before approaching the house. "They're checking for surveillance," Marcus said, apparently monitoring through his own equipment. "Professional behavior. This isn't a random cleanup crew." "The driver has a scar on his left cheek," Karen reported, adjusting her camera's focus, "and he's carrying what looks like a military-style duffel bag instead of cleaning supplies." "Excellent observation. Keep the photos coming." For the next hour, Karen documented everything: the men's systematic search of the property, their use of electronic detection equipment to sweep for bugs in cameras, their methodical removal of items from the house's interior. Every detail was captured through her lens and transmitted to Marcus, who was coordinating with other federal agents from his command post next door. But as Karen watched the cleanup operation unfold, she began to notice something that made her blood run cold. The men weren't just removing evidence, they were installing new equipment, motion sensors, security cameras, Communication devices. They weren't abandoning the location, they were upgrading it. Marcus, she whispered urgently into the phone, I don't think they're shutting down the operation. They're making it more secure. What do you see? They're installing surveillance equipment. Professional-grade stuff, like what you have, but more extensive. And they're running cables into the basement. Looks like they're setting up some kind of command center down there. There was a long pause on Marcus's end. That changes everything. They're not just cleaning up, they're preparing for expanded operations. What does that mean? It means Viktor Kozlov isn't running scared. He's adapting. And if he's upgrading this location, instead of abandoning it, he's planning something bigger. Karen felt a chill run down her spine as the implications sank in. The trafficking operation hadn't been disrupted by Marcus's surveillance, it had simply evolved to counter it. And now, instead of a temporary holding facility, the house behind her was being transformed into something more permanent and more dangerous. Karen, I need you to pull back from the window, Marcus said urgently. If they're installing counter-surveillance equipment, they might detect your camera lens. But even as Karen started to move away from her observation post, she caught sight of something that made her freeze. A third vehicle was approaching, a black SUV with tinted windows, and as it pulled into the driveway alongside the white van, she recognized the license plate from her months of surveillance photos. It was one of the government vehicles that had visited Marcus's house. Marcus, she said slowly, you need to see this. The black SUV that just arrived, it's one of the vehicles from my documentation of your house. License plate Delta Charlie 7491. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly 30 seconds. When Marcus finally spoke, his voice carried a tension Karen had never heard before. That's impossible. That vehicle belongs to the bureau. I'm looking right at it. Same plate, same vehicle. It's parked next to the van, and someone's getting out. Karen adjusted her camera focus and felt her world tilt on its axis. The man stepping out of the federal vehicle was someone she recognized, Agent David Chen, who had visited Marcus's house twice during her surveillance period. But instead of approaching Marcus's house, he was walking toward the traffickers at 1247 Elm Street, and they were greeting him like an old friend. Kieran, get away from the window right now, Marcus ordered, his voice tight with barely controlled urgency. But Karen was transfixed by what she was seeing through her lens. Agent Chen was embracing the scarred man from the white van. They were talking animatedly, pointing toward various parts of the house as if discussing plans. And then Chen opened the SUV's cargo area and began removing cases of equipment that looked identical to the surveillance gear Marcus had installed at his own house. He's giving them federal surveillance equipment, Karen whispered. The agent who visited your house is working with them. Karen, listen to me very carefully, Marcus said, his voice deadly calm. You need to get out of your house right now. Don't pack anything, don't turn on any lights. Just walk out your front door and get as far away as possible. What's happening? Agent Chen has been feeding information to Kozlov's network. If he's at that house right now, it means they know about you. They know you've been watching them. The words hit Karen like a physical blow. Her months of surveillance hadn't just been noticed by Marcus, they'd been observed by the very criminals she was now helping to investigate. Every photograph she'd taken, every pattern she'd documented, every detail she'd recorded had potentially been reported back to people who made their living by making other people disappear. How long have they known? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. I don't know. But if Chen is here personally, it means they're moving to clean up loose ends. You're a loose end, Karen. Karen's hands were shaking as she lowered the camera. Through her kitchen window, she could see the three men at the house looking in her direction. One of them was pointing directly at her window, while another was raising what appeared to be binoculars. They knew she was watching. They had always known. My car keys are upstairs, she said, panic creeping into her voice. Forget the car. They probably have it under surveillance. Go out your back door, through the Petersons' yard, and head for the elementary school. I'll meet you there in 10 minutes. Karen was already moving, grabbing her phone and camera while staying low beneath the window line. But as she reached for her back door, she heard the distinctive sound of vehicles starting up in the distance. Through her side window, she caught a glimpse of the white van pulling out of the driveway at 1247 Elm Street. It was heading in her direction. They're coming, she told Marcus, her voice tight with fear. How much time do you have? Karen peered through her front window and saw the van turning onto her street. Maybe 2 minutes? That's not enough time to reach the school. You need to hide where my house. Come through the back fence and enter through the sliding door. I'll guide you to a safe room. Karen didn't hesitate. She burst through her back door and sprinted across her yard toward the fence line. She'd spent months watching through her telephoto lens. The wooden barrier she'd cursed for blocking her view of Marcus's activities now represented her only chance of escape from people who had been watching her just as intently as she'd been watching them. She scrambled over the fence with desperate agility and landed hard on Marcus's perfectly manicured lawn. The sliding door was already open, and Marcus was waiting for her with his service weapon drawn. Basement, he said tersely, guiding her toward a door she'd never noticed during her external surveillance of his house. There's a safe room built into the foundation. The basement revealed another layer of Marcus's true identity. Banks of surveillance monitors lined the walls, displaying fee. The first shot shattered Karen's kitchen window at exactly 6:23 a.m. "They're breaching," Karen reported from her position at the surveillance console, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Two men entering through my back door, one through the front. The SUV team is moving to flank positions." Marcus crouched beside the basement's reinforced wall, his service weapon trained on the stairs leading down from the main floor. Chen still in the black SUV, coordinating from the street. "He's on radio communication with all three teams." "Perfect. Keep him talking." Karen's fingers flew across the communication equipment, as Marcus had taught her during their hasty preparation. Within seconds, she had intercepted and decoded the encrypted radio traffic between Chen and his criminal associates. "Stone, this is Agent Chen," came the voice through the speakers, cold and professional. "I know you can hear me. Send out the woman, and we can discuss terms." Marcus activated his own communication system, his voice carrying the authority of his federal position. "Chen, this is Special Agent Stone. You're surrounded by federal surveillance equipment that's been recording your collaboration with known human traffickers. Surrender now, and you might avoid a death sentence." Jen's laugh crackled through the radio. "You're in no position to make threats, Stone. My people have your location surrounded, and backup isn't coming because I've already reported this as a rogue agent situation. As far as the Bureau knows, you've gone off the rails and taken a civilian hostage." Karen felt her blood run cold at the revelation. Chen hadn't just been feeding information to the traffickers, he'd been positioning Marcus as the criminal. In official reports, even if they survived the immediate threat, Marcus would face federal charges based on Chun's false intelligence. "That's a problem for later," Marcus said quietly, reading her expression. "Right now, we focus on staying alive." The surveillance monitors showed the assault teams moving with military precision through Karen's house, systematically clearing each room. But their search patterns revealed a critical weakness. They were looking for a panicked civilian, not an organized resistance. Marcus Karen said urgently, "They're assuming I'm hiding somewhere in my house. They haven't considered that I might have escaped to yours. Which gives us maybe 10 minutes before they expand their search perimeter," Marcus replied. "Time enough to even the odds." He was already moving toward a weapons locker Karen hadn't noticed during her initial tour of the safe room. Inside were devices that looked more like science fiction than law enforcement equipment: night vision scopes, thermal imaging systems, and communication interceptors that could track every electronic signal in their immediate area. "What's the plan?" Karen asked. "We use your surveillance skills to coordinate a federal response that Chen can't intercept or compromise," Marcus explained, handing her a secure satellite communication device. "This connects directly to FBI headquarters in Washington, bypassing all local channels that Chen might monitor." Karen stared at the device, understanding the responsibility being placed in her hands. "You want me to call in federal backup?" "I want you to report a rogue federal agent collaborating with human traffickers while conducting tactical surveillance of their operations," Marcus corrected. "You've been documenting evidence for months. Now you get to present it to people who can actually do something about it." The radio crackled with Chen's voice again. "Stone, my people just finished searching the house. The woman isn't there. Where is she?" "Somewhere safe," Marcus replied, "along with 8 months of photographic evidence documenting your collaboration with Viktor Kozlov's trafficking network." The silence that followed was telling. Chen was processing the implications of Karen's documentation being in federal hands, but realizing that his carefully constructed false narrative was about to be exposed by the very evidence he'd been trying to eliminate. "You're bluffing," Chen said finally. "A suburban housewife with a camera isn't a threat to anything." Karen activated the satellite communicator and was immediately connected to an FBI command center in Washington. "This is civilian consultant Karen Hendricks, working with Special Agent Marcus Stone on Human Trafficking Investigation Designation, November 7 Alpha. I'm reporting a federal agent in collaboration with hostile subjects and requesting immediate tactical support." "Ma'am, please hold for authentication," came the professional response. Within minutes, Karen found herself connected to Assistant Director Sarah Martinez, who had been monitoring Marcus's undercover operation from the beginning. Karen quickly summarized the situation, transmitting digital copies of her photographic evidence and surveillance documentation in real time. "Outstanding work, Ms. Hendricks," Director Martinez said. "Federal tactical teams are being deployed to your location immediately. Maintain surveillance and document everything until support arrives." "How long until backup arrives?" Marcus asked. 22 minutes, Karen reported. "We don't have 22 minutes, Marcus replied, studying the tactical display. "Chun's people are expanding their search pattern. They'll find the basement entrance in the next few minutes." As if summoned by his words, the surveillance monitors showed 2 armed men approaching Marcus's house from different angles. They moved with the careful precision of trained operatives, checking sightlines and potential ambush points as they advanced. "Time to go active," Marcus said, pulling on tactical gear. "Karen, I need you to coordinate my movements using the surveillance network." Guide me to positions where I can engage them without being detected. You're going out there alone. I'm a federal agent trained for tactical operations, Marcus reminded her. You're a civilian with surveillance expertise. We each do what we're trained for. Karen watched through the monitors as Marcus emerged from a concealed exit she hadn't known existed, moving through his own backyard with the fluid precision of a professional soldier. Her months of watching him through her telephoto lens had never revealed this level of tactical capability. 2 hostiles approaching your position. From the east, she reported through their secure communication link. They're using your fence line for concealment. Copy. Engaging. What followed was a masterclass in tactical combat that Karen documented through multiple camera angles. Marcus moved like a ghost through terrain he'd been studying for months, using his intimate knowledge of every sightline and approach angle to systematically neutralize the threats surrounding them. The first hostile went down silently, taken by surprise, as Marcus emerged from concealment behind the equipment shed that Karen had always assumed was for pool maintenance. The second tried to call for backup, but found his radio equipment jammed by the same sophisticated systems Marcus had been using for his surveillance operation. 2 down, 4 remaining, Karen reported. But Chen is moving. He's leaving the SUV and approaching your house directly. He's coming to finish this personally, Marcus replied, his voice carrying grim satisfaction. Perfect, through her surveillance network. Karen watched Agent Chen advance toward Marcus's front door with the confidence of someone who believed he held all the tactical advantages. He was armed with federal-grade equipment and supported by professional criminals who had been operating successfully for years. But he was also walking into a trap that had been 8 months in the making. Chen, this is your last chance, Marcus announced through the external communication system. Surrender now or face the consequences. The only one facing consequences is you, Stone Chen replied, raising his weapon toward the front door. Rogue agents don't get happy endings. That was when Karen activated the neighborhood-wide surveillance network that Marcus had been building throughout his assignment. Every camera, every motion sensor, every recording device he'd installed over 8 months came online simultaneously, capturing Agent Chen's approach from dozens of angles and broadcasting the footage directly to FBI headquarters in real. Agent David Chen, Federal Badge number 4792. You are being recorded by federal surveillance equipment while collaborating with known human traffickers and threatening a federal agent, Karen announced through the external speakers. Your actions are being transmitted directly to FBI headquarters and will be used as evidence in your prosecution for treason and conspiracy. Chen's confident advance faltered as he realized the scope of the surveillance network surrounding him. Every move he'd made, every conversation with the traffickers, every decision to collaborate with criminals instead of arresting them, all of it had been documented and was now being transmitted to federal authorities in real time. Impossible, he said, but his voice carried less conviction than before. Agent Chen, came Director Martinez's voice through the speakers. Transmitted from Washington, you are hereby relieved of duty and ordered to surrender immediately. Federal tactical teams are 90 seconds from your position. The sound of approaching helicopters filled the air. Federal aircraft that Chen's false reports couldn't intercept or redirect. His carefully constructed narrative was collapsing in real time, exposed by the same surveillance obsession he'd been trying to eliminate. You stupid woman, Chen snarled, raising his weapon toward the house. Do you have any idea what you've destroyed? A human trafficking network, Karen replied.